Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Awakened Activism with Patricia Pearce. I'm Charissa Sims, live event host with Humanities Team, a 501c3 nonprofit organization whose mission is to make conscious living pervasive worldwide by 2040. And I'm coming to you live from Lafayette, Colorado. Welcome, Patricia. Where are you connecting from?
Thank you, Chris. I'm in Philadelphia, so a little ways away from you. But as I mentioned beforehand, Colorado is my home state, so I feel we're already connected in that way.
Beautiful. Well, I want to welcome those streaming live through the Humanities Team Facebook page, YouTube channel, and the Stream Plus members that are here in the green room with us. Thanks for being members and for being on camera. And I wanted to do a special shout out to the Sign Network with John and Summer Raymer at sign.network. We're so grateful for your partnership. Because it is a live program, we will have time for comments and questions. So wherever you're watching, feel free to just put it in the chat and try to get your question in within the first 30 to 40 minutes. And then you may get your question answered by Patricia. And she is a fairly new provider to Stream Plus. She's been with us a couple of months, and I wanted to share more about Patricia. Patricia Pearce is the author of two books, Beyond Jesus, My Spiritual Odyssey, and No One in Island, A Parable of Awakening, and is the host of the WeAwakening Substack. That sounds like a great show. I want to hear more about that. For 17 years, she served as a Presbyterian pastor. In the early 2000s, following the death of a close friend, she experienced a spiritual awakening in which she saw the fundamental interconnectedness of reality and the illusionary nature of separateness and the separate self. That's really in alignment with Humanities Team. The insights from her awakening led her beyond the bounds of conventional Christian belief, and in 2010, she left the church. Recognizing that our political and environmental crises are a manifestation of erroneous belief in separateness, she is committed to supporting the global shift into unitive consciousness that she knows the oneness of all life. So happy to hear your wisdom today, Patricia.
Thank you, Carissa. Thank you.
Well, I'd love to hear more about your own spiritual journey and especially this book about Jesus.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Well, I was I was raised in a pretty conventional Christian family, very mainstream. Religion was present, but it wasn't that overt for us. Um, but after college, I went into the Peace Corps and I served in Ecuador in South America, up in the Andes, and served among Quichua Indians there. And I had studied international relations in college, and so I had come into the Peace Corps with a very political orientation towards life, and I believed that if we just do our politics right, we're good. We can solve our problems and everything will be good. And when I got there, and I saw the extreme disparities of wealth, uh,
Mm.
I would travel sometimes from Quito, which is the capital, and where there are shopping malls, and it's there are parts of it that feel very first world, to use that term. And I would get on the bus and I would go back to the village where I was living, where the Quichua Indians, the kids had no shoes. They were suffering from malnutrition. People lived in like adobe huts with thatched roofs, no electricity, no running water. And every time I made this journey, it was like whiplash. It was whiplash. And it was so extreme that I felt as though politics, whatever's going on here, politics can't touch it. And I had the sense that at the root of it all, there was some sort of spiritual sickness. That's the way I thought of it at that time. There's a spiritual sickness that's playing out here. where a few people have a lot and the vast majority have very, very little and are just barely surviving. And then the second year that I was there for 2.5 years. And the second year that I was there, I was serving in a village where there had been some missionary activity for a few decades. And I began to see how, really centering our spiritual lives can have a great transformation in communities. And so anyway, that's what set me on the path. I had a sense after that experience. Well, when I thought about my future, I always saw myself doing some kind of a ministry, some kind of ministry. But I wasn't ready to take that plunge. So when I came back to the States, I was in Colorado and I taught for a while ESL and Spanish. But I kept feeling like some sort of ministry is like what I'm to be doing. So I finally thought, well, if that's what I'm seeing for my future, like, let's get on with it. So I applied to seminary and I went to seminary out in the Bay Area and I became a Presbyterian pastor.
Mm-hmm.
And I served in that capacity. I met someone there who became a very, very close friend. Her name was Tricia. And she and I were sort of going through some spiritual wilderness times together, and we really were accompanying one another through some, rough terrain in our own spiritual lives. Anyway, many years later, she'd already been diagnosed with aplastic anemia. She underwent a bone marrow transplant, and she ended up dying from complications. And her death deeply, deeply affected me because I felt as though I had lost the companion in my spiritual journey. And this is the other thing I really want to emphasize, Charissa, is that when she died, it's like it awakened something in me, like this very clear resolve in me.
Mm.
I sensed that there was some dimension of my existence, of my being, that I had never known. And I just had this clear resolve. I want to know what that is. And it just like sort of like put it out there to the universe. And I didn't even know what I was asking for because it was beyond my, the level of my consciousness at the time. So about a year later, year and a half later, I started experiencing all of these synchronicities that were just too bizarre. They were really cracking open my worldview. And anyway, to make a long story short, and I tell this whole story in my book, but I went to the woods one day as all of this was happening, and I just knew I needed to surrender, that I knew something profound was happening in my life, and I knew I needed to surrender to it. And so I went to the woods and I just kind of like offered myself, like, I don't know what this is, but here I am. And I didn't know what to do except to give thanks for the people in my life. And I started to do that. I started to say, thank you for this person. Thank you for this person. It's just this gratitude because I realized for some reason that whatever was happening in me was a result of my relationships.
Mm.
And as soon as I had that realization, it's like my eyes were opened and I saw, and I use the word saw, but it's not with my bodily eyes, right? But I saw with the spiritual eyes, I guess I'll put it that way. I saw that all of my life I had believed myself to be a separate self. And I had lived inside of this perception of myself as a separate being. And in this moment, it's like the veil just fell away, and I saw that that was just an illusion in my mind. The separate self is just an idea in my mind. And with that, all of these, waves of energy began cascading through my body in this very powerful Kundalini kind of an awakening. And I could see that I, whatever we mean when we use that pronoun I, I'm not a separate self. I am more like the expression of an infinite, infinite number of influences. It's like the whole cosmos is, all of these influences that are interplaying. And the image that came was like ripples on a pond that are coming together and interacting and forming these patterns. They're changing, There's no firm boundary. Everything is interacting with everything else. And it's more like, oh, what I am is like just like an expression of this infinite complexity. So this was a very energetic experience, and I was sobbing, and I felt like something in me was dying and something was being born at the same time. And finally, the energy began to subside. And as I opened my eyes, I saw a world that I had never seen before. It was incredible. Everything sparkling with sentience, with love. And I knew myself to be in love. And I knew that reality is this vastly interconnected whole, that that judgment doesn't exist, that death doesn't exist, and that everything is expressing this sentience of the totality of all that is.
So did you see this interconnectedness? Like you could literally like being clairvoyant. It was like being in another reality.
It had that effect. It had that sense of it, and it's sort of like seeing through, in a sense, seeing through like the solidity that we take to be reality. And it's like seeing through that and like seeing the energetic dimension of things where not even time exists. Everything is now and everything exists in the now. And that linear time as we experience it doesn't exist in that ultimate reality. Yeah.
I
I
see.
said, I prefaced all of that by saying to make a long story short, and I ended up making the long story long. But
Yeah, it
anyway,
just had to come out because it was magical.
and it was the watershed moment of my life that ended up also taking me out of my vocation as a pastor, because what I began to see was that this idea of separateness, which is an illusion, it doesn't exist. Nothing exists in separateness. But I could see how that consciousness of separateness, sometimes we call it the ego, had influenced Christian belief. And I came to see how that consciousness had shaped our understandings of Jesus and seeing him as some sort of separate being, special, separate from all of us. God is separate from us. It's so
Mhm.
separateness and specialness and exceptionalism, all of that stuff had found its way into the foundations of the religious belief system. But that all was a fallacy. And what Jesus was embodying and revealing was what we all are. We are all this Christ nature,
Mhm.
this divine nature, this light.
Yeah.
So that experience, has had ramifications on all of my life. And you also asked about the book. So
Yeah, because I was gonna
yeah,
ask you, we could tie it into that. Like, so I mean, Jesus said things like, you will do all that I do and more. I can't remember exactly. So he was implying it, but he embodied this. And so then he had these incredible healing abilities, which we all do, I believe. So maybe he had that experience where he fully surrendered to his divinity. And do you feel like that was part of his purpose here?
I really do. I really do. And yes, absolutely. And and so I was driving across the country some years back. Well, I guess it was 2011. It was about a year after my mother had passed, and we were going to be scattering her ashes in Colorado, and I was driving back. And I was along the interstate in Ohio, just like listening to a podcast, a Krista Tippett podcast. And I just got this download that I would write a book called Beyond Jesus
Mhm.
that would talk about how ego consciousness had shaped Christian belief.
Wow, that's
And
very deep.
it was very clear. The intention of it was crystal clear. I didn't sense that it was going to be a channeled work or anything like that. But I understood the intention and I'd been provided the title. Um, and I ended up writing it as a memoir because I felt like the best way would be to bring people along on my own journey to help other people experience how I came to that understanding of how that consciousness of ego had shaped Christian belief. And it really
Mm.
is about beyond Jesus. It's really about to go beyond the person of Jesus so that we can understand that we are what he was embodying and
Hmm.
revealing.
Yeah, it's an archetype, like a model
Hmm.
of what we can be if we choose to. Yeah,
Yes.
that's a beautiful message. And I really love Jesus, and I go to church. I go to Unity,
Hmm.
which I feel is in alignment with your awakening a little bit. It's like we are all part of God. Yeah, we are
Yes.
all
Yes.
divinity. So
Yes.
I would like to talk about this topic today, awakened activism. So you had your own spiritual awakening. What does that mean to you, awakened activism?
Yeah. Awakened activism for me is, I mean, to really boil it down, it is being in the world from an awakened perspective, knowing ourselves as love and imparting that through our own lives and what we do and how we show up. And a lot of people, when we hear the word activism, for a lot of people, like, alarms go off and red flags go up. And because we
I
have
think
a
of it
very,
as picketing.
yeah, exactly. Right. And exactly. Yeah. That our understanding of activism is so constrained. And I felt like I wanted to, help us understand that, well, I'll just speak personally for myself. I want to be present in this moment because we are going through a really important and tumultuous collective awakening.
I feel that my heart just expanded
Yeah.
there. Hmm.
And we are moving out of that consciousness of separateness, that dualistic mind, and we are moving into unitive consciousness. And as we know, it's a very turbulent ride in some ways because it's completely transformational. And at a deep level for us, it's very scary because the dualistic world is the world that we have known. And so there's this attempt to try to like keep it in place. And that manifests as a lot of, I would call them egoic patterns of division and attack and judging and blaming and
Hmm.
dominating. All of those are egoic patterns. They come out of that consciousness of separateness.
Hmm.
So we're in this moment where it's a really rocky ride. It's pretty turbulent, as we
Yeah,
know.
it seems like getting worse. It seems to be. Um,
Exactly. And I mean, we
Like,
could talk a lot about that. I think also this is a moment where the shadow content is coming up.
yes. Hmm.
Everything that we've tried to deny is coming up, and it's coming up not for us to do battle against it,
Mm-hmm.
but for us to see it and
Yeah.
to behold it from a stance of innocence and to hold it in love, because
Mm.
love is the power that transforms.
Mm.
It is the power that heals. And
Beautiful.
so, yeah, so coming back to activism, when we think of activism, we often think of it as a dualistic expression, which something based in an us them mentality. And we have to do battle against the powers that be or whatever, and we have to like get in their face and we have to shame them and we have to force them to change and all of that. So that's a form of activism that comes out of a dualistic perspective or an egoic perspective. For
Yeah.
me, awakened activism comes out of the unitive knowing.
Mm.
We are all interconnected,
Mm-hmm.
that division doesn't exist, that the concept of enemy doesn't exist. And, A Course in Miracles talks about everything is either an expression of love or a cry for love.
Yeah, there's still love there. It's
And it's really that cry for love that shows itself in these ways that end up being injurious to others, but really at the base of it, it's a cry for love. It's when we
mm,
don't know who we truly are, then we live in fear.
mm,
If we're living in the out of the concept of separateness, we're living in fear because we perceive ourselves to be all alone in the cosmos. And how can we not be afraid? I mean, oh my gosh.
yeah.
So,
And then
yeah.
sometimes quite literally we could be alone and not realize that at any moment we can connect
Yes.
to others or
Yes.
guides or angels, whatever you believe in.
Yes. And it's like that idea of aloneness is what kind of, draws the curtains of our minds so that we don't perceive those connections. But
Mhm.
they're always there. And as you say, they're always available to us.
Mm. So, in a way, when you come to this realization, activism, you can have hopefully compassion for others who have a seemingly opposite viewpoint. Or maybe you can see some percentage of truth in it, even seeing, like, oh, well, I can see it why you see it this way.
Yeah, and I think that's a really helpful practice to inquire, what has brought someone to believe this? And what have they experienced in their lives that has brought them to believe this? And what are the fears that they're carrying
Mm-hmm.
that have brought them, to this point? And so for me, and we can talk about what I see as the three planes of awakened
Oh,
activism if you'd
yeah, we're
like to
going to
go
get
into that.
into that. And then we're
Okay.
going to show a video too. But yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
you
yeah.
can finish your thought and then I'm going to play a clip.
Yeah. So anyway, just to kind of sum up, so for me, what awakened activism is, and there are different dimensions of it, but it really is for myself. I want to show up. I want to meet this moment. I believe we have all been preparing for this moment for many lifetimes. We've been doing our own inner transformational work, and we're here on this planet. We've chosen to be here on this planet at this moment of this great awakening. We have chosen to be here. We've chosen to support this process. And the way that we do that is to know ourselves as love, to embody that love, and to extend that love. So I'll pause there, and if there's a clip you want to show, we can then move into what I see as the different dimensions of it.
Yes, that sounds good. Let's do that. I'd love to give people a taste of your course on Stream Plus. Can we play that first clip on an introduction to awakened activism?
I would like then to share my intention, the intention that I bring to this course, and that is that I intend to help us understand a little more fully our present context, our global context. My intention is to help us understand activism from a unitive perspective, and also to offer some tools and practices that you can bring to bear as you explore in your own life what it will mean for you to be an awakened activist. So, I'd like to start off by just giving you a brief overview of what we'll be covering during this course. Again, as I said, we'll be looking at our planetary context. So I'll be speaking about that. I'm also going to talk with you about egoic activism versus awakened activism and what I see as the difference between those two. And then finally, we will be exploring three dimensions or planes of awakened activism. So those are the three things we'll be covering: our context, the difference between egoic activism and unitive or awakened activism, and the different planes or dimensions of awakened activism. So right now, again, I'd like you to just take a moment to close your eyes and listen inwardly to this question. When you hear the word activism, what do you think of? What do you see? And what do you feel in your body as you imagine this?
Well, I would love for our audience to participate if they did close their eyes and think about activism. How do you feel? What did you think about? Would anyone be willing to comment on that and share? You could feel free to put it in the chat. And yes, steps towards change. We have someone put in the chat, which I think is a beautiful identification with awakened activism. It's like a first step. Mm. Thank you for sharing that. And feel free, anyone, wherever you're watching, YouTube, Facebook, a lot of activity. We have another comment from Lori. A lot of activity, not riot-like or peaceful. Mhm. So I feel that way too. I tend to think of crowds. So we have another comment. The conventional divination often implies militance. Mm, yeah. Well, we can go into a little bit of egoic activism and awakened activism, like the difference of those. And then we can play another clip about our global context. And we have
Yeah.
another comment. Eva says, love emotion is awakened activism.
Mm,
That's perfect.
beautiful.
I feel
Yes,
like
it's
it
beautiful.
summarized, yeah, what you said
Yeah,
about love.
exactly. Exactly. Yes. So, yeah, we began to touch on this, but the differences between what I call egoic activism and awakened activism is, as I said before, egoic activism comes out of a dualistic paradigm where there's an us and there's a them. And it's confrontational and it's intended to try to force change. And it's also focused on externals. It focuses on conditions and tries to change those conditions. So, what it focuses on are the manifestations that we see in the world. And that's what it, those are the things that are, I can't think of what passive tense here, but we try to affect change in those conditions, those
Mm,
external conditions.
yeah.
And oftentimes, what we try to do is affect change in those conditions by using egoic strategies, such as, and I mentioned this before, attacking or shaming or blaming. Um, so we use egoic strategies to try to affect change in conditions. Awakened activism comes, as I said before, out of a unitive understanding that we are all interconnected. And it also understands that everything is a manifestation of consciousness. So that everything that we're witnessing playing out right now on the national and the global stage, all of this is simply a manifestation of consciousness.
Hmm.
And so awakened activism looks more deeply, not just at the conditions or the manifestations, but at the consciousness from which those conditions are arising.
Mm, yeah, that makes
Because Yeah, because consciousness, you can think of it as consciousness is the soil out of which the world that we are creating is coming forth.
Mm,
And because we've held this consciousness of dualism and of separateness, what has manifested is a world based in separateness, where people other each other, see each other through the lens of, race or sex, gender, all of these things. This divisive lens to divide, is to separate. It's
mm,
dualistic. So I believe I might have shared this dream in the course, but I had this dream a few years ago where I'm in some old European city and I step out and of this apartment building, and there's this big group of people, this whole throng of people who are going past, and they're going to some sort of a demonstration having to do with climate change. And as
mm,
I step out, I start moving in the opposite direction. And
mm.
in the dream, I'm aware that I want to go to the headwaters. That was the term the dream offered me. I want to go to the headwaters of the climate crisis where it originates in consciousness.
Oh, that's deep.
So for me, that's what awakened activism is. It's going to the headwaters and it's doing our work there.
That you
It,
see it as the origin. The headwaters is the origin.
yes, out of which everything else is flowing.
Mm,
And so as an awakened activist, I want to be going to that level of consciousness, and I want to be addressing at that level the sources of the conflicts that we're experiencing. And
mm,
really, in its essence, at its core, it is the illusory idea of separateness.
I see. What do you think of the concept that everything in our reality is a mirror or something that's showing up needs to be healed within our own consciousness? What do you think about that
I
theory?
think I think that's absolutely accurate, and I do see it that way. And one of the challenges that we have, especially in the Western world, because we are so inculcated in the individualistic perspective,
Hmm.
that we look outside and say, "Oh, that's a reflection of me. How can I work with that in me?" And it's still like a me thing, but it's a we thing. you know what we're experiencing is a we thing. It's the collective consciousness or the collective unconsciousness that
Mm,
we're seeing playing out. And along those lines, Carissa, this opening experience that I shared about some years ago,
hmm.
in the aftermath of that Kundalini experience, I was in a heightened state of consciousness for several days, and the energy in my body was just like I felt like my hands were on fire, and I felt like I was getting this information download, and this energy, it kept like growing, and then it culminated in this flash of understanding that we are in a dream,
Oh,
and it was like we're in a dream, and and I'm somebody who's done dream work for decades. And so I know how to work with dreams. And if we're in a dream, I had a dream when I was in seminary. I took a dream interpretation class. And my professor always said, all dreams come in the interest of health and wholeness,
mm,
even nightmares. And
mm,
nightmares come as nightmares because the information they want to share is so important that they want to shake us awake.
mm.
And so if we are in a dream, and we are acting out the content
Oh, you froze for a moment.
important
Okay.
things.
Oh, there you are. Okay. Oh, great. I'm glad you're back.
Did I cut out?
You cut out
absence
for a
there.
moment.
Okay.
Maybe we weren't ready to hear that profound wisdom. We had a divine intervention.
Oh, that's great.
Well, I have a few comments in the chat. Judith says, act on beliefs, knowing could be words, help, explanation. Lori says, if a tree falls in the woods, does it make a sound? Only if someone is conscious of it. That's a really
That's
profound
great.
statement. Yeah.
That's great.
Well, I'd like to play another clip from your course on Stream Plus where you talk about our global context, egoic versus awakened activism.
Now, I would like to begin to talk about what I call, well, two sorts of ways or consciousnesses that we can bring to the question of activism. One is what I call egoic activism. Now, I sometimes talk about that consciousness of separateness as the egoic consciousness. So, egoic consciousness is, first of all, it's based in the belief in separateness. It operates within that paradigm of separateness. And so in egoic activism, there's this us-them dualism, which of course is an expression of that separateness consciousness. There's this us-them dualism, and it operates externally. It focuses on what's happening externally, on the conditions and the circumstances that are observed in the outside world. It also utilizes the mechanisms of the ego to try to bring about change. And those mechanisms of the ego are things like, identifying who the enemy is, mechanisms of ridicule or shaming or blaming or attacking or coercing or threatening. All of those are mechanisms of the ego mind. They're thought patterns of the ego mind that are then brought to bear in egoic activism to try to effect change in the circumstances and the conditions. Now, these ways of going about egoic activism, they may succeed in altering some circumstances. Egoic activism can bring about some change in the circumstances and the conditions. But what it cannot do is effect true transformation. Because here's the thing, everything arises from consciousness. That's the basic thing that we need to understand. Everything arises from consciousness. So if we are inhabiting a consciousness of separateness, we will be creating systems and institutions and so forth. We will be manifesting expressions of separateness. So egoic activism can address and change some conditions and circumstances in the outer world, but what it cannot do is change the consciousness from which those circumstances are arising.
Hmm. It's nice to hear you explain it here live on the interview and then go deeper into the clip, for your course is so amazing. So wonderful. Well, now maybe we could talk about the three planes of awakened activism, and then we'll play a clip too after.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so I see that there are three planes at which we can participate as awakened activists in this moment. There's the inner plane, and this is a plane that we've been doing a lot of work on, probably most of us for most of our lives. And that really has to do with looking inside of ourselves to notice. And it's just about noticing, to notice where those egoic patterns are showing up. in our own minds. These patterns of judging and making someone an enemy and all of that. To notice those in our own minds, and when we notice them, not to judge them, because that's just more of the same, but to hold them in compassion and love, and really to allow our own inner state to become uh, a place of serenity and a place of harmony. So there's the inner plane, what we would call our inner work. And I think I really want to emphasize that when we're doing our inner work, we are engaging in a form of awakened activism.
That's
Because
beautiful.
consciousness is a whole, right? There is no separateness. So when we are doing that dismantling inside of ourselves of those patterns, we are having an effect on the whole of consciousness. So as we do our inner work, we are contributing to the whole. So that's one plane, the inner plane. Another plane, the second plane that I talk about in the course, is what I call the non-manifested plane, or we could call it the spiritual plane. How we engage as awakened activists with the spiritual plane, with the non-embodied beings who are here to help us and participate in this. And how do we use our own spiritual capacities? We are both embodied and we are spirit. So how do we engage with that non-manifested plane and be co-creators in that sense? How do we bring to bear our own capacities as visionaries, as people who can activate the power of prayer and to operate at that non-manifested level? And then the third plane is what we tend to think of as activism, which is that which happens on the outer plane. And that really is when we make love visible. And one person in a group that I lead, an awakened activism group, talked about it as practicing our resonance in public, which I think is a really beautiful way to say it too. So we're practicing our resonance with love and as love, and we're doing that in public. And so we're bringing that energy to bear in our outer engagements. And it can be just like one-to-one. I meet someone and I interact with them in a loving way. And
Mhm.
that is helping shift their own consciousness. If they're having a hard day, that is another way of making love visible.
Mm.
And we can also, I happen to be somebody who shows up for like No Kings marches and things. It's just part of what I choose to do. And when I show up, my intention is to be present there as an embodiment of love. And in that group of people to send out love and to really to allow that energy to sort of, pervade the spaces around me. And it's also what it does when we make love visible. We're not only deepening our own awareness of ourselves as love, but we're sort of destabilizing for someone else the idea of enemy and separateness, because all of a sudden they're witnessing a loving act where maybe they didn't expect that.
Mm.
And so we're helping shift their consciousness as well.
Yeah, I find even something simple like saying hello or how are you or a smile can really snap people out of their, I don't know, whatever inner world they're in.
Yeah, it's so true, isn't it? And
Hmm.
we've probably all been the recipients of that too,
Yeah,
of someone just being really friendly and outgoing. It's like, oh, you just come away feeling so good. It's a
it's true.
wonderful gift that we have to give.
Yeah, thank you for that reminder. Well, I'd like to play that third clip on engaging the inner plane, an awakened activism.
We're working with our own minds, and we're doing it from a place of compassion, from love. Remember that ultimate reality is love. So as we do this inner work, we are bringing that love to this inner work that we do. And so we witness these patterns as they arise in our minds, these egoic paradigms and these thought forms. We notice them as they come up. And we simply do that. We simply notice them. So that's one thing that we do, is we begin to dissolve those egoic patterns in our own mind that, again, are giving rise to all of these things that we're seeing playing out in the world that come from that consciousness. So we're dissolving those ideas in our own minds. And as we do that, we are shifting the whole, because consciousness is a whole. So as we are doing this in our own minds, we're actually affecting the whole. Another thing that we do is we do our own shadow work. We sort of welcome back into our awareness all those aspects of ourselves that we have pushed aside, that we have not wanted to own, that we have not wanted to acknowledge as parts of ourselves. And we can do this in different ways. And one of them is a practice called active imagination. And I will include in this course a PDF that will tell you how you can do this practice of active imagination. It's where you begin to dialogue with parts of yourself. And as I mentioned before, one of the things that we're working with collectively big time right now is the collective shadow. And in this country of the United States, the national and societal shadow. So as we do our own shadow work, as we welcome back into our own awareness those aspects of ourselves that we've tried to push away and repress, we are helping that whole integration to take place.
I love that last comment about integrating the shadow work.
Yeah, it's so important. And of course, shadow is shadow because we try to drive it away. And so
Mm,
as we witness this eruption of, in this country of the societal shadow, we might want to try to, push it away, push it back into the shadow. But really, this is the moment to let it be seen, and to be seen in the light of love.
mm, yeah, beautiful. To love that shadow.
Yes, yes. And as we love it, then it becomes transformed, it becomes transmuted. And
Hmm.
that which was injurious is released to become something that is, really more loving and more of an expression of our true natures.
I see. I see. So we do have a question. Philip asks, what is awake?
Awake for me is being in the awareness of the oneness of all that is. It's being in the awareness, like in this moment, just being in the awareness of my oneness with all that is, that that love is the ultimate reality. And it's coming to know our true natures. And some people would call it the true self. So for me, being awake is being aware of, of the truth of who we are, and the truth of the interconnectedness and the loving nature of all reality.
Wow, that's an incredible definition. So, in going back to the three planes of awakened activism, we have another clip called Engaging the Outer Plane. Can we play that clip, please?
This is the power that we have as awakened activists in the outer world. We can embody and enact love such that it is visible and can be experienced by others and can help them along the way in their own awakening process, in their own liberation from those egoic patterns. And I want to speak just briefly also about the collective actions. And of course, this is also what we often think of is when we think of activism is, public demonstrations, protests, and things like that. And I personally choose to show up to those simply because I want to be counted. I want to stand in the principle of democracy, freedom. But I always want to be in those gatherings with a particular kind of energy and a particular kind of consciousness. Sometimes those gatherings can have a lot of anger energy, but sometimes they're quite joyful. They're refreshingly joyful and celebratory, which is a beautiful thing. And I was at a gathering not too long ago here in Philadelphia, where I live. And the gathering, there's a lot of edgy energy to it, which, people are feeling what they're feeling, and that's fine. But I was just standing there, and at one point I just closed my eyes, and I was really pretty much meditating and intentionally holding a particular energy and holding the energy of the whole, holding the energy of everyone. So we can show up to those kind of events as well from this different state of consciousness, embodying a different energy and really making space for something new and life-giving and life-affirming to arise.
That's so incredible. I love how you embodied to shift the energy, or you just had this acceptance of the energy that was there. And I was curious, did something manifest in the 3D world after you were holding this space and basically meditating at this event where there was tension?
Well, when in these big gatherings, there's a lot of energy. So it's I can't say that I noticed anything obvious, but I want to share a story that, as serendipity would have it, somebody just told me this morning
Okay.
in another Zoom call I was on. He was describing somebody had told him of being on a bus, getting on a bus, riding on a bus, and someone got on the bus and went to the back of the bus. This man who was very angry and agitated, and he was sitting back there and he was
Hmm.
cursing and he was just
Hmm.
really like volatile. And this person just sat there, and she just closed her eyes, and she sent love to him. She didn't do anything visible. She was just there sending love to him. And after a while, he quieted. And then she felt someone tapping on her shoulder. And she turned around, and it was this man. And he said, "Thank you for praying for me."
That is powerful.
And she was in that moment as an awakened activist. I mean, she chose to be actively engaged in that moment as a presence of love and to share that love with him. I mean, she could have been disconnected and just let it go, but no, she took an active stance to share that energy with him, and it made it an obvious difference for him, such that he even felt it and knew who it was coming from.
Yeah, that is so beautiful. What do you mean by this collective moment? And how can we be a presence for true transformation?
Yeah, what I see when I talk about this collective moment, I'm talking about this this moment that we're in of this awakening of our consciousness out of dualism and into unitive consciousness. So we've all collectively come to be present on this planet in this moment for this transformation. And we are experiencing it together. And so that's what I mean when I talk about this collective moment.
Mm.
And I think, our technology has helped us also experience our own connectedness and to know that we are a collective who on this planet right now, and we are going through this moment together.
Wonderful. Well, do you feel there's a planetary shift and a return of the feminine?
Absolutely. And that's something else that I talk about in the course. So there are a lot of things that are contributing to this awakening process, and one of them is very much the rise of the return of the feminine principle. And that is, I would say, a big part of what's happening. And also, there are higher frequency energies that are at play. They're really bathing the planet. So there's this moment where the whole frequency of the planet is rising, and the return of the feminine. Those are two very essential components of this awakening process.
Mm,
Catalysts, perhaps we could say.
wonderful. Well, are there some simple ways we can awaken activism in our own lives?
Well, I would say simply, some of the things that we've touched on, to notice when, for instance, if we're reading the news and we find something in us is getting triggered or fearful or angry, this would be on the inner plane, right? To notice those feelings, to hold those feelings, not to attach to them and not to resist them, but to hold them, and to allow really to tend to our own the scared parts that are inside of us. So that's a simple thing that we can do. Just notice what we're feeling and be mindful of it, and to be compassionate toward it. On the second dimension, the non-manifested, to really actively connect with the universality of love, the totality of love, and to allow the energy and the frequency of an awakened world to abide within us, and to let it anchor its energies in us. So that's a simple thing that we can do. And then the third thing, to meet people and moments from that place of love, and to just extend love in whatever ways the moment offers.
Well, thank you, Patricia, for this incredible conversation today. And thank you, everyone else, for joining us. Join Stream Plus now and gain immediate access to this empowering program, Awaken Activism, with Patricia Pearce. If you're not a member of Humanities Stream Plus, I would encourage you to join now. And we're proud to say that Stream Plus is the largest global streaming platform for consciousness raising masterclasses and transformational education. I wanted to thank Steve Farrell, Dee Meyer, and the production team, Jim Gray, Eva Lee, Nanette Kennedy, and the rest of Humanities team. It's been such a pleasure connecting with you today, and thank you all for sharing your light with us. Blessings.
Thank you, Charissa.